I think there's very few human beings who are willing to biohack themselves to the degree that you've already biohacked your own body and mind.
I have these genetically modified plasmids in my shoulder here, and they're pumping out this protein called follistatin. And follistatin helps you from breaking down muscle. So you're basically only building muscle.
Wow.
It also reduces your epigenetic age. So I'm 47 years old, but my epigenetic age is 30. So I'm 17 years younger genetically.
When I'm thinking of genetics, I'm thinking of those DNA strands that contain all the data about you. There's a part of DNA strand that gets altered based on your own life and your own decisions.
Lifestyle behavior is being passed down generation after generation.
So if both my parents were chain smokers before I was born, something bad like a lung cancer might express itself in me even if I have never smoked cigarettes.
That's right.
That's a little...
I'm going to do another gene therapy, which they think will be able to increase your IQ 5 to 10 points. I hope I'm the first person in the world to get it.
Does this scare you?
Say you can't lift your arm or something. If somebody practiced P-DTR, he'll come up to you and then he'll be like, boop, 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 boop. And then all of a sudden you can move your arm. And it seems like, okay, how is that real?
How do you look at this whole scientific research angle?
A lot of people are basically just manipulating the data around the study. You know, the blue zone thing. There's these blue zones where people live longer. That was just completely debunked as lies.
Really? Gut-related issues have become extremely common in India.
I don't eat protein powders.
How come?
It's not food. Humans cannot live on powders. You can't.
Have you ever spoken to Brian Johnson?
A few months ago, I sent him a calendar invite for New Year's Eve in 300 years to have some breakfast together.
Would you want to live that long?
I don't ever want to die.
Farbood Nivi, or Farb as most of his friends know him, is one of the most interesting guests that we've brought on the Ranveer show this year. This year, all over the world of content has become obsessed with the topic of longevity. We've already hosted Brian Johnson on TRS. This is another podcast from that same domain of longevity, of health, of biohacking. There's very few human beings globally who are putting their bodies and minds through genetic engineering, through new age biohacking based technologies. Farb is one of those people. So if you're someone who's constantly trying to better their own health and stay one step ahead of the natural process of biological aging, this episode will teach you a lot about the technologies that already exist, the technologies that are already available to humans all over the world. There's very few people who are altering their bodies and their minds the way Farb is altering his own body and his own mind. Lots to learn from today's episode. You're going to enjoy it if health-related knowledge is what you seek through the internet. This is Farb's debut on TRS and the world of podcasting in general. I haven't been this excited about a conversation in a very long time.
Thanks for having me.
Over the last 2 days, I've gotten to know the golden heart that sits inside your chest.
Oh, thanks.
The very difficult journey that you've endured and the radiance that you have in public. I didn't even know that you are Farb when I saw you at the Network State Conference. I just saw this guy who was emitting light and I wanted to go have a conversation. And over the course of that conversation with you and about you with other people, I got to know that you're a bit of a real life Captain America. You've had some journey, man. We're going to cover the story of the journey. We're going to cover every single aspect of what you've been through. But I think there's very few human beings who are willing to biohack themselves to the degree that you've already biohacked your own body and mind. Very interesting conversation. I don't know why the internet hasn't found you enough yet, Farb. So welcome to the Ranveer show.
Thanks for having me.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty great. Singapore is awesome. I'm sort of used to the time shift and, being around great people like yourself, and Balaji's here is a good friend, and Naval and Brian Johnson. These guys are mostly just my friends. And so going and doing things with them is just kind of what I like to do. All the other stuff is kind of extra.
Okay. There's some people you meet in the world who have a lot of goodness in their eyes. And in my experience, that goodness is always an outcome of a difficult past. I'd love for you to relay the story that you told me outside.
Sure.
Initially, in a very short manner.
Sure.
Just run through it initially so people know who they're listening to.
Sure. Happy to. I've been biohacking for 20-something years, and it started because when I was in college, I was really sick, and nobody could figure out why. I woke up every morning and had to run to the bathroom to get sick. I couldn't sleep lying down. I had to sleep sitting up. And, doctors kept giving me antibiotics, kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so, this is the early 2000s. The internet's pretty new, but thank God we had the internet. And so I started figuring out the problem myself. I ended up finding a diet called macrobiotics. They taught it in Austin, Texas. I moved to Austin, Texas. I spent 7 years studying it, making my own food every day, lots of fermented foods, miso, vegetables, things like that. If you know Brian Johnson's blueprint diet, it's actually very similar. And I went from being able to eat nothing, like even a piece of white bread I couldn't eat, to being able to eat anything. It healed me and made me super strong. And in macrobiotics, their understanding of health is that it's strength, that you should be able to eat anything and be fine. And so that was great. But then a couple of years later, I got hit by a car in San Francisco. I was a skinny 32-year-old. I had to crawl off the road before another car ran me over, lie on my back, call 911. And I spent most of 2009 in the hospital. I lost half a kidney. I lost 6 inches of intestines. I have a 12-inch incision up my belly. Couldn't walk, couldn't stand up straight. So I had to fix that again, turn back to the internet, started studying peptides and hormone therapy and advanced training. And I went from being unable to walk to being able to climb up, rope ladders with just my hands, right? So I had to fix that problem again. Fast forward a few years, in my early 40s, I went deaf. It was a genetic issue. But it gets really bad in your 40s. I had 2 hearing aids. And again, they told me this is just life. It happens to some people, but I wasn't okay with that. And so I had to figure out the problem, go back to the internet, diagnose the problem myself, find the best surgeon I could find to fix it. Went and had a surgery, had the bones in my ears removed and replaced with titanium ones. And then I wake up from surgery, my ears are stuffed with cotton, and he's whispering in my ear and I can hear him, and I just begin crying. I've been a musician my whole life, so going deaf was the craziest idea ever. And then to wake up from surgery and immediately be able to hear again, it was pretty crazy.
You can hear me really well. Surgery just finished, and I'm just whispering right now. You can hear me? Congratulations. Are you happy? Huh? How about you crying? Okay, good. It's a good crying. Happy for you.
And that went well. And then earlier this year, I kind of joke and say, if you think those things were bad, earlier this year I got fat for the first time in my life, which was kind of crazy because I've always either been skinny or in really good shape. But, as you age, your metabolism changes, and it's kind of inevitable in a lot of ways. And so I was in Honduras at Vitalia, which is like a network state where they can do different things and do experimental medicine and stuff like that. And I was there again with Balaji and Naval and Brian Johnson. And they have a clinic there that does this genetic experimental gene therapy, where they basically take what are called plasmids, or like naked strands of DNA, and they genetically re-engineer them and they inject them in you. So I am basically, this is why I call it like Captain America tech, right? So I have these genetically modified plasmids in my shoulder here. They'll live there for a year or two, and they're pumping out this protein called follistatin. And follistatin helps you from breaking down muscle. So you're basically only building muscle. And so in a short amount of time, I lost all this fat, put on all this muscle. I started sharing my journey on Twitter. Jeff Bezos started following me like the day after I got this shot. Mark Benioff started following me. And it's crazy because, you know, when I started doing this stuff 20 years ago, everyone was telling me I'm crazy, I'm going to kill myself. What are all the risks involved? And I don't think someone like Jeff Bezos would have been following me 20 years ago. But now everybody is into this stuff. And one way I think about it is, you know, everyone's always like, what are the risks involved? And my response is, well, what are the risks involved in doing nothing? Because we know those risks. It's 100% guaranteed that you're going to grow old and die miserably. I'll take my risks with the gene therapy versus the guaranteed old miserable death. So, you know, I did the follistatin gene therapy. I ended up investing in the company. And I'm going to do another gene therapy with them hopefully this year. And this one is for something called Clotho, which they think will be able to increase your IQ 5 to 10 points, which would be crazy. I call this my Jason Bourne arc, you know, you need like the physical drug and the mental drug. And they think it could reverse calcification of arteries, which would be world changing. So we are truly living in a time where you can do things, and most people just don't realize it. You know, when I give this talk about my journey, a lot of people start crying, and, you know, they're not actually crying for me. When you see somebody else start crying, it kind of gives you permission to let your own pain out. It lets your own things that you've been holding back out. And so people start getting teary-eyed because I'll show a video of me crying, and then they'll start crying. But it's not really about me that they're crying. You know, it's for themselves. And that's kind of what I want to happen, because it's like, let it out. Don't feel like you have to just deal with these horrible things that are happening to you. You can do something about it, you know, and you have to take your life into your own hands. The system's not going to fix you.
Do you think they're also crying from a place of finding hope in science?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They see that this person did something and it helped them. You know, I'm waking up and I'm hearing again and I'm crying tears of joy. It's not tears of sadness, right? I go from deaf to hearing in a 1-hour surgery. And so, yeah, they start, that feeling of hope fills them up. They're like, oh, and they come up to me afterwards and they'll be like, oh, you know, my dad's going through this, or I went through this. And I realize I got to go do something about it instead of just letting the system tell me that, oh, that's life. You know, things happen. You have the internet. You can learn anything, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can begin anywhere I wish to.
Yeah. Please.
I would like to actually begin at the recent chapter.
Sure.
Of the genetic modification.
Sure.
You said you injected something into your shoulder?
Yeah.
Follistatin?
Yeah. So what they actually injected, so, you know, you have DNA inside cells, right?
Yeah.
But if you have DNA that is just by themselves, not inside a cell, they call them plasmids. And we've known about plasmids for a long time. But the problem is that if you genetically modify a plasmid and put it inside somebody, the plasmid basically breaks down in, like, you know, a few hours. So it's not actually that helpful, right?
As in someone else's plasmid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, actually, they're bacterial plasmids.
So it's not even another
It's
human
not even
being.
human, yeah. They take DNA out of a bacteria, right? They genetically modify that DNA, and then they inject it into you or into an animal or whatever. But the problem is that it breaks down in a couple of hours, so it can't really do its job. Recently, they've discovered a way. This is why the company that does it, that I invested in, is called MiniCircle. We've recently discovered ways of sort of restructuring that plasmid so it doesn't break down as easily, okay? And so now that they've figured that out, they're like, oh, cool, let's try this again. Because instead of the plasmids breaking down in a couple of hours, they'll actually last for a couple of years, okay? And so what's really cool is they take the plasmids, they tell it, you know, they genetically re-engineer it to make whatever protein they want, basically. They inject it into you. Those plasmids go into your own cells and they start living inside your cells, right? So the cells in my arm here are sort of genetically re-engineered to be a little mini factory. And that mini factory is creating this protein called follistatin. And those plasmids, they use your own cell's machinery. to make whatever protein, because that's what's already going inside your cells, right? So these cells are living inside my right shoulder. They'll live there for a year or two. They'll use my own cell's machinery to create this protein called follistatin, and it's just pumping it into my blood 24 hours a day. So you can almost imagine it's like a little mini factory that's living inside you, working 24 hours a day.
Gotcha. You know this phrase about how energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but only transformed from one form to another.
Yeah.
Effectively, in order to build muscle mass, traditionally speaking, you lift weights, you tear down your muscle a little bit due to your work in the gym, and then you eat the right food, which is high in protein. Now that food is broken down by your body and used to replenish your muscles.
That's right.
As you age, your body's ability to both go intense in the gym as well as utilize your food better starts degrading. This happens for guys usually at around 40.
Yep.
Fair to say?
That's right.
Okay. What this technology does is that it sits inside your muscle cells all over your body.
Yeah, because I mean, it's pumped. It's starting here and it's getting pumped into your blood and it's going all over your body.
Okay.
Yeah.
Including your neck,
Everywhere.
back.
Yeah.
It probably just utilizes the food you're eating better within that micro factory called a cell.
Basically, yeah. With follistatin, so your body also produces something called myostatin. Myostatin breaks down muscle, okay? Follistatin's effect is actually to bind to the myostatin and keep it from breaking down muscle.
Gotcha.
So your body's always building muscle and always breaking down muscle. This kind of stops the breaking down part. So it's just building muscle.
Right.
So like, for example, I broke this finger about almost 2 months ago when I was in Italy. So I've not been working out that much. I actually put on muscle in the past 2 months that I haven't been working out because my body is just not breaking down muscle really, because the follistatin is keeping the breakdown from happening. It's crazy.
Wow.
It also reduces your epigenetic age. So I'm 47 years old, but my epigenetic age, which is sort of a genetic marker for your age, is 30. So I'm 17 years younger genetically.
What is the epigenetic age?
So, you have your DNA, your genetics. Epigenetics, we've kind of learned more recently, is the set of rules that determine which of your genes are on or off.
Okay.
Right? Because just because you have a certain gene doesn't mean it's doing anything. The gene actually has to be encoding for a protein or not encoding, right? And so this is how complex this stuff is, right? We thought, we figured out the human genome. We figured it out. And someone's like, nope, there's actually a whole other set of genetics we call epigenetics, which is the genetics on top of your genetics. That's even maybe more important because it's going to determine if your genes express themselves or don't express themselves. So we use epigenetic age as a mark, because as you age, your epigenetics gets worse, right? Your body's ability to regulate which genes turn on and off kind of gets worse.
Right.
So they've learned to use it as a marker for your sort of general age, right? Because they can kind of see that as you age, your epigenetic health gets worse.
Gotcha.
And they can kind of track different people. So for me, my epigenetic age is 17 years younger than my chronological age.
Do they measure it using just like a blood report?
Yeah, like a little blood prick, a little finger prick, and they can do it. Yeah, you can buy these tests and do them online.
Is this where technology has reached? Is this the edge of technology when it comes to genetic technology?
This is sort of the best we know right now. We always discover something and we think we've figured everything out. Then it turns out there's a whole bunch more stuff that we don't even understand.
Right.
I think epigenetics are super important because we don't necessarily have to genetically re-engineer you. We can sort of decide which genes we want to turn on and which genes we want to turn off. And epigenetics is actually, it's kind of wild. So, your genes are passed down from parent to children, right? And we generally think you can't change your genetics. I mean, we can with CRISPR technology and stuff like that. But, just naturally speaking, you can't really change your genetics. But you can change your epigenetics. Your lifestyle actually impacts your epigenetics. So if you smoke, if you drink, if you don't sleep, if you don't exercise, your epigenetics get worse, okay? And not only can you influence your gene expression in your life, you actually pass those on. So if you smoke cigarettes and that makes your epigenetics worse, you pass that on to your kid. And they have to then change their lifestyle to try and reverse the damage that you've done to your epigenetic system. So epigenetics is interesting because it's both passed on, it's hereditary, but it's also influenced within your own life based on your lifestyle.
Gotcha. When I'm thinking of genetics, I'm thinking of those DNA strands that contain all the data about
That's right.
you.
Yeah.
So all the ancestors that made you up, you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 16 great-grandparents, and then the list keeps going on.
Yep. All their behaviors inside your genes.
Yeah. There's some memory of your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother and great-great-great-great-grandfather somewhere inside your cells.
Yep.
But there's a part of that same DNA strand that gets altered based on your own life and your own decisions.
Yeah.
And that's what epigenetics
Yeah.
is about.
That's right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're saying that your lifestyle can alter your epigenetic profile.
Yep.
So if you smoke and drink, traditionally, drinking harms your liver.
Yep.
Smoking harms your lungs and your heart,
Yep.
right? But you're saying there's a deeper form of damage where you can literally damage your DNA strand.
Yeah. You're damaging which genes get expressed and which genes don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if both my parents were chain smokers before I was born,
Right.
and they'd been chain smokers for 20 years before I was born,
Yep.
maybe something bad like a lung cancer might express itself in me even if I've never smoked cigarettes.
That's right.
That's a little up.
Yeah. In fact, like some of the things they can show is that if you influence like a mouse's epigenetics by starving them, for example, okay, that will influence that mouse's epigenetics in its lifetime. And it'll pass that down for 5 or 6 generations, right? So the behavior of your ancestors, not just the genes themselves, but their actual lifestyle behavior is being passed down generation after generation. If you want to, this is probably the only good definition of generational trauma,
Right?
is the bad stuff that your ancestors had to go through is actually being passed down to you. But you can change it. You can improve these things with lifestyle as well. Eating right, sleeping, exercise, those things improve your epigenetic health. That's why you can test your epigenetic health and actually watch yourself become epigenetically younger or epigenetically older. You know,
What actions can you take to affect it positively?
so it's all the things you already know about. The most important thing is probably sleep, getting a lot of sleep. And, you know, we live in this grind culture where people think that, you know, I'll sleep 4 hours instead of 8 hours. Sleep has a literal impact on your epigenetic health because gene repair is happening, epigenetic repair is happening while you sleep. You know, I kind of think of sleep as, people think of it as the opposite of being awake. I don't think of it as the opposite of being awake. I think it's the complement of being awake, okay? It's like a trance that you put yourself into because, you know, there's a stage in your sleep where your body is paralyzed, right? And the reason that your body is paralyzed at some stages in your sleep is because there's repair happening inside your cells. And if you weren't paralyzed, you'd start twitching and flailing around and fall out of the bed and hit yourself or something like that. So you have to sort of go into this trance so your body can heal itself, right? So if you're not getting enough time in that state, your body just doesn't have a chance to heal itself. And because of the food that you eat, the molecules in the food that you eat, your body uses to make those epigenetic repairs. So with epigenetics, there's these little molecules that are surrounding your DNA. And you know, this gets into some cool physics. Based on electromagnetism, basically, those molecules that wrap around a gene, for example, will cause the gene to either open up or close, okay? And so you need the sleep, you need the diet to give you the ingredients, the molecules, right? Then you need the sleep so that it can take those molecules and go wrap them around your DNA where they're supposed to be so your genes are healthy, right? So diet, sleep, and exercise, I think, are probably the biggest things you can do. And the thing is, we already know them, right? You can do the gene therapy and stuff like that, and that helps. But I usually tell people, like, hey, if you're somebody's like, hey, I'm thinking of doing hormone therapy and start taking testosterone. And I'm like, well, are you sleeping? Are you eating right? Are you getting exercise? Because if you're not doing those things, don't just go start injecting yourself with testosterone, right? First do those things. And then if you want to do the testosterone, do it. But always make sure you got the base down, you know?
Is it fair to say that someone who's taking care of themselves, sleeping well, exercising, eating clean, they probably have a better epigenetic age than the physical?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's something I heard on Joe Rogan's podcast once where they said that a man's life will eventually show up on his face at some point.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it. I like that.
Right? You also end up meeting people who look way younger than their physical age. And when you get to know about them, they're usually just happier people. They've taken care of their physical health, their mental health, etc. There's people whose looks, the quote unquote looks, fade away in their 40s.
Yeah.
There's a word in India called tej, which it means like the shine on someone's face.
Okay, yeah.
You know, like kind of like aura.
Sure.
And you see the tej going away.
Yeah.
Now, in my eyes, that's definitely an outcome of a degradation of physical and mental health.
Yeah.
But also the epigenetic age being worse than the physical age.
That's right.
So when someone smokes a lot or drinks a lot, you end up starting to see it on their face a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
But we're also talking about epigenetics here, other than liver health and like gut health.
Well, yeah, because, you know, the way the cells on your face appear is based on what the genes are telling them to do, right? So are you producing collagen in your skin, right? That's your genes are telling you to either produce collagen or don't produce collagen. So your epigenetics are really determining a lot of that. There's another way people say it is that the body keeps score. Your body always keeps the score of what you're doing. You can't get away from it. You know, it always knows the score.
Have you ever done a deep stretching session? You seem like a flexible guy. I'm pretty sure you stretch.
You know, I think I'm a big mobility freak, and I've done some, tweet storms and things like that about mobility, because everybody's always talking about strength and weightlifting and muscle and stuff, and that's important. I think people really misunderstand how important mobility is. This is another, I can geek out on this stuff endlessly. So, there's something called fascia, which is, when you have like a piece of meat, there's that like silver skin on top of the meat. Right. That's basically your fascia. So everything in your body is covered in this fascia, okay? Your muscles are covered in it. Your organs are covered in it. And part of the reason why is because it helps keep everything separate, okay? And so this is something that we've kind of understood more recently. So, all the bodybuilding thinking from 40 years ago hasn't quite caught up to it. But if you notice how some people, they get old and they get like this, right, or they can't lift their arm up anymore. As you age, your fascia starts sticking to each other. Okay? It's literally growing into itself. And once it's done growing into itself, you can't separate it. Okay. And I mean, part of the reason people are hunched over too is because their bone health, right? They're not keeping they're not. One of the things you'll see me do all the time is you take your hands and you put them on your chest like this. Okay. Your elbows down, hands like this. And this is just a way to put yourself back into a healthy posture.
Oh, wow.
It's just a simple trick.
Like a deeper stretch for your shoulders, your
This
upper
is
back.
how you always want to be. But, we sit here and we start doing this. And so I'll see myself, I'll do this just to kind of go back to that point of what is like a healthy posture, right? Because your bones are not rocks. They're more like clay, okay? You have to shape them or gravity will shape them for you, okay? So you have all this fascia. If you don't keep it moving, it's going to slowly start sticking together. Right? If you can only lift your arm up this high right now, in a year, it'll be this. And in a few more years, it'll be this, right? So you have to be constantly pushing yourself to the edge of your mobility or you're going to lose it. There's a saying, move it or lose it, right? So mobility is hugely important. It's probably tough to do here, but another thing I always have somebody do is see if you can just do a squat, right, with your butt all the way down and your back straight. And most people can't do it. And it's like, bro, that's not a good sign. You're, 28 years old and you'd already lost that mobility and you're just going to keep losing it. You want to be, 90 years old and able to bend down and pick something up and lift your arm up and things like that. Mobility is a lot bigger than people think. And strangely enough, too much weightlifting, too much bodybuilding actually creates inflammation. That inflammation starts pushing the fascia to start sticking together. And so that's why you'll see a lot of these like bodybuilder guys, they can't straighten their arm. It's because their fascia is basically stuck at that point. So you got to keep moving. Yeah, you got to move.
It's something every weight training oriented dude learns the hard way.
Yeah.
And often it's very late.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's good to get an injury earlier. I have a friend, his name's Tiger Shroff. He is probably the most athletic human I have ever seen in my life. He's a Bollywood star and we played football with him.
Okay.
He plays well enough to have gone pro when he was younger.
Right.
In my first match with him, I tore my ACL on my knee.
Oh my God.
And I was very deflated about it because it's a very psychologically traumatic
Yeah,
injury.
and that's a tough injury, yeah.
You can't play football for a while after that. And I called him up just to vent. And he said that, hey man, I've got bad injuries as well. Just know that these injuries are always an opportunity to modify your body a little bit. Try understanding why the injury happened. It's probably also because your leg is not strong enough and flexible enough.
That's right. There's an old saying, which is one disease, long life, no disease, short life. Because you always have some sort of issue. And if you become aware of it, you can do something about it and you can overcome it. But if you live as though you have no problems, or if you don't have the knowledge of the problem, you can't solve it.
Yeah.
So in a way, like I said, when I first got sick in college, that sort of started me on this journey of like, I have to figure out my health problems on my own. And, the first health problem I had was so major, like not even being able to eat a piece of bread without going and getting sick is kind of insane. Having to sleep sitting up is kind of insane, right?
It's very common today. These kind of gut issues.
Yeah, gut issues are a big issue now. And so I'm like, if I could fix that issue, then I can probably fix most of the other things. So instead of just going to a doctor and doing what they say, take it into your own hands and solve the problem. We have the internet, we have technology, you can do it, but you have to do it yourself.
So coming back to what we were talking about in terms of mobility and stretching, have you ever had a yoga session?
Oh yeah, I do private yoga classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that helps with your mobility.
Absolutely.
Core strength.
Yeah, I mean, I can geek out on yoga for a while. I actually think yoga is a lot more than mobility. One of the things that I think people don't realize is yoga is a form of internal massage, right? It's not easy to massage your organs, right? You can massage my arm, but how do I massage my spleen? So I think a lot of the movements in yoga are actually about sort of compressing and decompressing the organs, stretching the organs. It's essentially a form of internal massage that helps those organs stay healthy.
Yeah. For me, the reason I stuck to my yoga practice, and I started it just like a couple of years ago, the reason I stuck was because if I was ever in a phase of overthinking or bad mental health, a deep stretching session would calm me down a bit. It didn't fix my mental health completely, but it would calm me down a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be able to sleep better that night. I'd be able to think with more clarity. On a short-term basis, that's what happened. On a medium-term basis, I saw my skin improving a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm an on-camera person. I need to care about how my skin and hair look.
Yeah.
And in the long term, it's what you said.
Yeah.
It's about staying younger. It's about having a more flexible body. And I think over time, you can look at someone and tell if they do their stretching or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a calmness on their face. Like that's what radiates out of your face as well.
Yeah.
Like you're clearly someone who cares about holistic fitness rather than just big muscles, which you have as well.
Thanks. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. So yoga has a lot of fascia impact, like mobility. I think it has this organ health ability, and then it's neurological, right? So I think a lot of what you're talking about is some of the neurological impacts of doing yoga. And there's a relatively new technique called P-DTR. It was invented by this Argentinian surgeon. This guy's kind of a wild guy. He grew up in a very rich family. He is I think, jiu-jitsu master, and he's an orthopedic surgeon. So, people have issues like with mobility or something's broken. And he's doing surgery on them. And he realized that about a third of the time he cuts somebody open, there's nothing wrong. But surgery itself is damaging you. And so in his head, he's like, I have to stop doing this. I'm like cutting people open who think they have I think they have an issue. And it turns out when I get in there, there's nothing wrong. And now I've damaged this person. And so he developed P-DTR. It's kind of crazy term. It stands for proprioceptive deep tendon reflex. So if you see somebody practice P-DTR, it seems like voodoo magic, because literally they're like, say you can't lift your arm or something. He'll come up to you and he'll do some tests, and then he'll be like, boop, 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 boop. And then all of a sudden you can move your arm. And it seems like, okay, how is that real, right?
But wait, hasn't he flick some other part of your body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't even do much. Like pull your ear, scratch your forehead, and all of a sudden you can move your arm. And you're like, how does that work? Right? This guy literally takes people who are in a wheelchair and can't walk and gets them walking in 5 minutes. For me, one of the main times that I did P-DTR was after my accident. I couldn't sort of bend over and touch my toes anymore. And everybody tells you, oh, your hamstrings are tight. Stretch your hamstrings, get some massage. And it turns out that wasn't the problem. When P-DTR, at first they do like a diagnostic test, right? And so the guy tests me, and it takes about an hour. We're kind of figuring out what's going on. He's doing muscle tests and things like that. And eventually he fixes it, and I can bend all the way down and put my hands on the ground. And I'm like, okay. He didn't do any massage. He didn't do any stretching, just a bunch of like weird popping and poking and pulling and things like this. And I'm like, what was going on? And so this is where the proprioceptive part of it comes in. Proprioception is a few things. It's your body's understanding of where you are in physical space. Okay. And so somebody like Michael Jordan has incredible proprioception, okay? And a lot of your proprioception is in your fascia, right? We were talking about all this fascia that covers everything, because your fascia is incredibly innervated. It has tons of nerves in it. And so your understanding of where your foot is right now is basically coming from your fascia, okay? And so proprioception is, where am I in physical space? It's also your sense of pain, your sense of touch, your sense of heat, your sense of cold, okay? And all of these have different nerve endings, right? So this is touch. I can feel this. This is a different nerve than the pain nerve, and it's a different nerve, it's a different nerve ending than the cold, right? So even though like the nerve endings are different, the pathways they use are all the same.
Gotcha.
Okay? And so P-DTR sort of takes advantage of this. And it turns out that like a lot of times when you have trauma, whether it's physical trauma or emotional trauma, your body remembers it, okay? And so in P-DTR, what they're trying to do is figure out what's why does my body not want to do this? So in my case where I couldn't bend over anymore, right? It turns out that the way he explained it is like, look, it's not that your hamstrings were tight and you couldn't bend over. It's your body is so intelligent, right? For some reason, probably because the trauma of your accident and the surgery and all these things, every time you tried to bend over, your body stopped you from doing it. And how did it do that? It tightened your hamstrings. Okay? And so in a sense, you think, oh, my hamstrings are tight. Yeah, but not chronically tight. Your own body's intelligence is like, don't let this guy bend over, because it didn't have the confidence to bring me back up. And so it's like, I'm not even going to let him bend over. Okay. And so through the P-DTR work, they can basically tell your body, chill out. It's okay. Everything's fine. And you stand up and touch your hands onto the ground. So going back to the yoga point, right? Yoga is working on this nervous system, this proprioception system that your body has. And, yoga is just wild and amazing, right? It's like doing neurological things. It's doing organ things. It's doing fascia and mobility things. There's a reason it's stuck around this long, right? There's a reason there's so many people obsessed with it, right? And so there's a reason that it's spread all over the world.
So many tangents to take. When I started doing yoga, I got much better at football because I was in control of my body.
Of course, yeah. Your proprioception improved.
Yeah, the fascia was getting worked. I saw a lot of football training pages where they spoke about sprint speed, and they said that even that's related to your fascia.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So I think in terms of athletic capabilities, the fascia isn't spoken about in the mainstream as much as it should be spoken about.
Yeah, that's right.
But the thing is, it's important for people who are not pro athletes as well.
Oh, it's important for everybody.
Right?
Yeah. Your fascial health is probably more important than your muscle health, more important than just about anything, because it's your whole body is covered in it. Every organ, every muscle, every bone.
And maybe we haven't done enough scientific research on the fascia to even understand what it helps with.
Yeah, it's. I think more recently people are getting into fascial work. There's a whole other esoteric practice I can talk about if you want to, that also involves fascia. It's called ELDOA. This is something it's actually like been around for a couple of decades, but still most people don't know about it. It's a French method. I call it scientific yoga. Because there's actually a lot of moves in ELDOA that are like in yoga. There's one that I use a lot. So sometimes I'll get this pain that kind of comes down my shoulder, my arm all the way here. It's because something's getting pinched back here, right? And the ELDOA move for this, tell me if this doesn't look like yoga, is you start here, okay? You go here, you pull your wings up, and then you go up like this, okay? And what that's doing is creating separation in a specific vertebrae, and it's creating decompression. And the way it's doing it is with your fascia. What's cool about ELDOA is there is a movement to basically create decompression in any joint in your body. And some of them are very weird. Like this is the most normal looking one. Some of them are very strange and difficult to get into. And you can find somebody who can teach you. But it's also using fascia as a sort of hack. What it does is by sort of holding your body in a certain way, you're pinching off your fascia. So when you do this one, you're supposed to be sitting down on the floor with your legs crossed. The idea is like you want to sort of pinch all the fascia up here. You want to pinch all the fascia down here and then create separation at that joint. And so you're kind of using your fascia as almost like like you almost imagine like wrapping a towel around something and so that you could pull it apart, right? So that's also using fascia to do a sort of therapy. And I'm telling you, like this move, when this used to get bad, I would for months be in just excruciating pain. Level 9 pain, level 10 pain, just couldn't sleep, just misery, right? I can do that 3 times in one day and it's gone.
Even this conversation, I know for a fact it's going to get some level of backlash.
Sure, yeah.
From what I have understood to be the scientistic community. So you and me are scientific as well. Looking towards furthering science. I think Nawal also talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous to be scientistic through the course of human life.
Yeah.
You can't deny the effectiveness of a treatment or a solution just because you don't think that there's enough scientific research about it. What if it's already working? My angle is there should be more scientific research about it and then come to your conclusions. But don't completely strike off an alternative therapy. That's called being scientistic. I think inquiry and exploration are needed when it comes to these kind of alternative treatments.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Another tangential question I had with respect to the scientistic and scientific angle is, PDTR. What's the full form again?
Proprioceptive deep tendon reflex.
So you said that you had that problem with your shoulder
Yeah.
where there was like just shooting pain.
Yeah.
And after doing a few tests, they understood your musculature better.
Yeah.
And eventually was it a therapist?
Yep.
They came up to you and just flicked your nose, touched you in
Yeah, basically.
different parts of your forehead.
Yeah.
And then the pain kind of just vanished.
Yeah.
I went through something called NKT at my physical
Oh,
therapist.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, where basically I told her that I'm getting hip pain because of my football. And she just put light pressure on my leg at different points and told me like kind of work against that pressure.
Yep.
Move your leg.
Yep.
By the end of a 15-minute NKT session, your pain goes away. But when you get up from the place you're lying down on, you also feel a little high. And I'm like, what is happening? I didn't know my body's capable of this. I went and told a bunch of my doctor friends, and they're not even willing to agree that this is a real thing.
Yeah.
They said that no, this is in your mind.
Yeah.
Some of them did agree.
Right.
And that's my differentiation of a good doctor versus a bad doctor.
Yeah.
Openness.
Yeah.
With a scientific bent of mind.
Sure.
Specifically when it comes to PDTR, I feel it can possibly solve a lot of the problems that we see in people's bodies. How do you look at this whole scientific research angle behind these kind of therapies?
Firstly, it was invented by a very successful orthopedic surgeon. The guy can do the surgery too, right? If you're being scientific and being rational and caring about the patient, why are you cutting people open if they don't need it, right? And so he was, sort of morally forced to try and figure out another way to do it. And when something has so little risk, like, okay, we'll spend 20 minutes and see if this fixes it, then of course you should do it. Whether or not we understand the science behind it is a separate question. If it's non-invasive, why wouldn't you try all the non-invasive things before you started cutting somebody open? You know what I mean? So if you're this orthopedic surgeon who, the thing with surgeons is they're amazing, but when you have a problem and you go to a surgeon, unsurprisingly, often they recommend surgery.
Yeah.
Right? Everywhere they look, they see an opportunity for surgery, and that can either be the best thing or it might not be. So if I'm just being rational about trying to solve a problem, I'm going to first try and do the non-invasive methods, right? Exhaust all the non-invasive methods. And if it doesn't work and you need to fix it, then maybe you do something invasive. Now, on a broken scaphoid, there's no option for a non-invasive method. The bone is dying. Eventually, the whole thing will die and my arm will fall off, my hand will fall off, right? So we're just being rational. Logic is... studies and law, I call studies, sort of the modern religious text. People are like, there was a study that did this, so this is the new thing. And it's like, look at these studies. Most of them are not reproducible, okay? Most of them are not even done particularly well. We're constantly learning that a lot of people are basically just manipulating the data around the study. The blue zone thing, right? That there's these blue zones where people live longer. That was just completely debunked as lies. It's pension fraud. They're literally committing pension fraud and they have bad data. It has nothing, Okinawa, this area, this Mediterranean area where they're like, this is where all the long people live. Turns out it was all lies.
Why?
Because basically, the pension fraud part was basically they're saying that these people who are dead are actually still alive so that they can get money from the government or from a business for somebody's pension. So they're like, yes, we have all these old ladies in my village. They're all 110 years old. Please keep sending me their pension money. They've been dead for 20 years, okay? And then, the other side of it is just bad data where they're like, this person was born 120 years ago. The record, this country's been invaded 20 times. The building with all the records is burned down 20 times and was bombed, but somehow all of this data is highly accurate, So a lot of this stuff is just like made up. And then as long as you say the word study and you put somebody with a PhD on it, all of a sudden, if you disagree with it, you're like a crazy person and you're not scientific. And it's like, no, you're not scientific, right? Science follows logic. right? If it's not logical, then you're not being scientific.
I mean, and this is something I've come to realize. So 9 years ago when we started this YouTube channel, it was a health and fitness channel, and that required me to do a lot of research for the sake of videos.
Yeah.
That's why I realized that there's scientific backing for almost any health theory out there.
If you want to study, there's a study.
Right? I discovered Andrew Huberman a couple of years ago, like the
Nice.
rest of the world, and he keeps highlighting peer-reviewed studies.
Yeah.
And I'm a massive Huberman fan. I've recommended him to like my Hindi audience as well. And now I get to know that even peer-reviewed studies don't matter as much.
Yeah.
So I think the practical truth for the course of human life is learn how to analyze studies yourself and let your experiences determine your decision-making.
That's right.
Fair to say?
Yeah. And, there's like how much data is behind something. So, there is so much data around sleep that all kind of points in the right direction. Maybe it's not right, but it's not one study with 10 people. I'm a big sauna person. Sauna is one of the most studied things you can do. Maybe all the studies are wrong. I don't know. But there's such a wealth of data that shows that sauna is like one of the simplest single things you can do. Is it correlation? Is it causation? It's tough to figure that out, right? You got to do double-blind, placebo-controlled studies with thousands of people over decades to figure it out. But there is a wealth of data there versus some study that's like one study with 30 people that was kind of done in a haphazard way. That's kind of the way I think about it.
If you read enough studies, you'll be able to catch the loopholes after a point.
Yeah.
If an automatic question arises in your head while you're analyzing a study, that's usually the loophole. Where you go, hold on, why did they not count this factor in? Hold on, why was only this group of people made to go through this stuff? I wonder what the actions in this group of people's lives were outside of the study material related to this study. If these questions pop up, then it's usually not a foolproof study. That's what I learned. That's just my experience. But all in all, unfortunately, there's scientific backing for every health theory out there.
Basically, there's a study for everything.
You know what ghee is, right?
Yeah.
So we've had people come on the show who have celebrated ghee.
Yeah.
We've had people who've come on the show who've dissed ghee.
Right.
And we've had people who've come on the show and said, hey, have ghee in moderation.
Yeah.
And there's scientific backing for all three schools.
Yeah.
So eventually I've realized that everyone's body is different. You live your own subjective reality. Study as much as you want, but make your own decisions.
And is there a good explanation, right? Just because you can predict something doesn't mean you have a good explanation for why it happens. So in the case of sauna, part of why I like sauna is because I think there's a good explanation. So when your body is exposed to heat, your body creates heat shock proteins, okay? And you need to be exposed to a certain level of heat for a certain amount of time for your body to start producing heat shock proteins. This we can prove. We can take animals, we can put them in a heat situation, we can test their blood beforehand, we can test their blood afterwards, and we can see, look, the heat creates heat shock proteins. Okay, cool. Now, what do the heat shock proteins do? We can observe their effect. Heat shock proteins help repair DNA. They help repair proteins that get malformed, okay? So, okay, that's a good explanation. I don't necessarily need the study because I have the logical explanation for why it's working, right? And so I think a lot of times people, they do the study, they see the correlation, they assume that's causation, but like, where is the explanation for why this is even working in the first place? That's why I'm not actually a big fan of cold shock therapy. There's a lot less, data around cold shock versus heat shock. And I've not really seen a good explanation for why cold shock works. Now, I know it works from makes you feel better. It gives you kind of a buzz because, your body starts producing dopamine and other molecules to deal with the fact that you're freezing, right? So I'm not necessarily saying that's not good, but it's also kind of rough on your skin. And, your skin's a very important organ, right? So I'm not sure whether repeated cold shock is that great for your skin. Heat shock, they actually find helps produce collagen in the skin. So I like it for that reason. It gets blood flow to the skin. So, if you want to do the Coldshock, if it makes you happy, I think you're probably fine. I've just not been as much convinced by it.
Yeah. I heard, I think it was Naval and Joe Rogan speaking on a podcast, and they spoke about how Warren Buffett has 6 Coca-Colas a day and eats McDonald's.
Yeah.
And he's still alive
Yeah.
and he's happy. So perhaps the only key to long-term health is happiness.
I think it's hugely important. And, I think happiness is also a very physical trait. People tend to either just be happy or not happy. You can influence it for sure. But I think there's so much of it is just in your body, whether or not you're a happy person or, unhappy person. But he seems like he's a happy guy. I mean, Donald Trump's the same, right? He eats McDonald's and, he's not that old though. Buffett's in his 90s, I think.
Yeah.
I think Trump's not even 80, But he only sleeps 4 hours a day. But again, if you're being logical, well, then you'd say, well, okay, but if he can do all those things while drinking Coca-Cola, he'd probably be even healthier if he didn't drink the Coca-Cola,
This entire section of this podcast is about the limitations of science. It's turned into that, which is why when it comes to health conversations, I also value personal experiences. So let's go back to that personal experience you had about injecting your shoulder with folistatin.
So, it's not actually, in fact, people do inject folistatin. So part of the reason they picked folistatin as the molecule to genetically engineer for is because bodybuilders have been injecting folistatin for decades. And so they know it's safe, okay? But the problem with folistatin is that it breaks down so quickly that even if you're injecting it 3 times a day, you're not getting that much benefit from it because it just breaks down like that. So what they did here is instead of injecting you with folistatin, they genetically engineer this DNA to make folistatin. And then they put that DNA inside you and your body's just making folistatin 24 hours a day. Right.
Do you think this would be allowed for professional athletes? Because then professional athletes, no, right?
Yeah. It would be considered performance enhancing.
Is it officially considered performance enhancing?
I think probably, yeah. And you can't do genetic modifications yet, I don't think.
But,
but in the enhanced games, Peter Thiel started the enhanced games where you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
It's like Olympics with no rules.
Right.
Wow. And the thing is, people are going to start watching the enhanced games and they're going to be more entertaining than the Olympics. And, you're going to just be like, forget about the Olympics. I'm watching the enhanced game. That guy just ran 100 meters in 5 seconds, and there's healthy ways to do these things, and anyways, they're all juicing. They're just figuring out ways to hide it, right? Lance Armstrong, greatest cyclist of all time. Turns out the guy was just juicing the whole time, Hopefully we don't learn that about Michael Phelps because, the guy's got like 25 gold medals and hopefully he did it, honestly. But yeah, that's the other cool thing with this technology for the gene therapy is you could imagine using it almost as a form of drugs, right? So they think they can use this same technology to basically cure HIV, cure herpes, because they will basically tell it to make a certain type of protein. They'll inject you with that, and your body will almost be creating its own drugs internally 24 hours a day. So instead of having to take a pill, your body's making its own drugs.
Gotcha. What's in that injection tube?
Crazy thing about it is it's literally one shot. It's like getting any other shot. Doesn't really hurt. Takes 2 seconds, right?
Did it hurt at all?
No.
Okay, go on.
It was literally goes boop and you're done. And it's basically just those plasmids, those naked strands of DNA that have been genetically re-engineered. They go into here. They work their way inside your own cells, and they live inside your cells, and they use your cells to make this protein.
Gotcha.
Crazy.
So you're saying that this same logic within this technology can be used to perhaps treat HIV in the long term.
Yeah.
That's what's being researched upon right now.
Yeah.
But as of now, as we speak in 2024, it just helps you stay jacked.
Yeah. And hopefully before the end of 2024, it might make me a little bit smarter.
Yeah?
Because the next one is called, like I said, it was called Clotho, and they think that could increase your IQ level by 5 to 10 points.
How do you think that works?
So again, Clotho is a molecule, is a protein your body is already creating. And the reason they think that it could increase your IQ is because what they see is that people with high levels of natural Clotho tend to have a higher IQ. And so they're kind of being like, oh, okay, well, if we make your body just make Clotho all the time, maybe that'll increase your IQ. They're not sure yet because they haven't done it on anybody yet. But that's the logic.
You're willing to like put your hand up?
I hope I'm the first person in the world to get it, quite frankly, but hopefully I'll be one of the first 10.
Does this scare you?
It scares me not to do it.
You're willing to modify your body to that degree?
Yeah, because I already know what the other path is. Decay, death, misery.
Right.
And again, it's not like Clotho is something that doesn't exist in your body. Your body already is making it and using it. So you're adding some more of it. You know, could it do something bad? The other cool thing about this technology in particular is they can turn it off. It has a kill switch. They also genetically modify the bacteria that they put in you, the DNA. They don't put bacteria in you. They take the DNA out of the bacteria and they put the DNA in you. They modify it with a kill switch. So you can take a round of antibiotics and it turns it off. So again, you know, when I was evaluating this, like people think I take crazy risks. I'm very risk averse. When I broke this finger, I think I saw 6 different doctors about it before I figured out whether I should do surgery or not do surgery. Most people go see one doctor and just do whatever they say. I don't like that. I'm like, no, I need to get like multiple opinions on this. I'm actually risk averse. So before I decided to do this, when I was in Honduras, I talked to Brian Johnson because Brian Johnson did it too. He had 3 different genetics people look at it to evaluate the safety profile. You know, he had one of the best geneticists in the world look at it. And when they said, okay, it seems like worst case scenario is it just doesn't work. It's going to be safe. Maybe it doesn't work, but it's not going to kill you. It's not going to harm you. And again, if there's something, you know, if you do some blood work and find out something goes wrong, you take some antibiotics and it turns it off. So to me, that's not actually particularly risky relative to the risk of not doing things that help you. Or again, we already know you're going to grow old and die and be miserable and it's not fun.
If you don't mind me asking you this, how expensive was it?
Oh, I think it's $25K.
$25K USD?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
For one shot?
For one shot.
And it lasts you a couple of years?
They think it lasts about 1 to 2 years is what we're seeing.
Okay. Assuming that it lasts a year, that's roughly about $2K a month.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in your eyes, that's worth it?
In my eyes, it's worth it. Maybe I don't know that I would have done this if I was 20 years old. But I'm almost 50, so I don't want to get worse. And again, it's tough to reverse things. It's once you have pathology or disease, it's actually very difficult to reverse it, right? You want to catch things before you get the disease.
Prevention is better than
maintenance. Aubrey de Grey, who's one of my heroes in this space, he's kind of one of the great longevity thinkers. He puts it really well. So you have metabolism, right? Which is all the different processes in your body. It's insanely complex. Tens of millions of different processes going on all the time. We may never understand it, okay? And then on the other side, you have pathology, which is disease. And basically, because your metabolism isn't perfect, eventually you get disease, right? You have cancerous cells floating around in you, but your body is killing them before they turn into a tumor, okay? But your metabolism isn't perfect. In a lot of cases, eventually your body starts losing the war. Its ability to fight the cancer is worse than the cancer's ability to grow, right? So imperfect metabolism leads to pathology, okay? But there's something in the middle. And what's in the middle is damage. Okay, so you're constantly accumulating damage, right? And while pathology is difficult to fix and metabolism is difficult to understand, we actually understand damage very well. And there aren't very many forms of damage that your body undergoes. So if we can figure out therapies for those types of damage, we don't need you to have perfect metabolism. You'll never get the pathology because we're fixing it all the time. One way he puts it is like, do you know why there's no 200-year-old cars? Because cars haven't been around for 200 years, but there will be a 200-year-old car because cars are easy to maintain, right? And if you want your car to last 200 years, you got to change the oil. If something breaks, you fix it. You maintain the damage. You fix the damage as it's occurring a little bit at a time. And then it works forever. So sort of your body is an incredibly complicated machine, right? So if we can fix the damage as it's happening, then you don't get the disease.
Have you ever spoken to Brian Johnson about how long the two of you wish to live?
That's a good question. You know, a few months ago, I sent him a calendar invite for New Year's Eve in 300 years to have some breakfast together. So hopefully we'll make that calendar invitation.
Would you want to live that long?
I don't ever want to die. And, you know, it's like, do you want to be alive tomorrow? When will your answer to that be no? The only time it might be no is if you are suffering so miserably, right? You're in a bed, you can't move, you're in pain all the time. You might say, I don't want to be alive tomorrow. But if you feel the way you do right now, do you think you'll ever say you don't want to be alive tomorrow? I don't think so. So if I feel the way I do right now, I don't think I'll ever say I don't want to be alive tomorrow. So why would I say I want to be dead in 100 years? What people, it's so weird to me because people are like, oh, I don't want to live forever. And it's like, okay, well, just tell me when you want to be miserable and in pain, because that's what we're talking about avoiding, is just not being suffering from physical decay. You'll always want to be alive tomorrow if you're feeling good today.
Okay.
You know.
I'm just trying to get to know you better, bro.
Thanks.
That's the nature of this podcast.
Yeah,
like
great.
we try to
I'm enjoying it.
get into people's realities.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, biohacking conversations don't happen as much as they should be happening in India.
Okay.
But the furthest we've gone is speaking about Ozempic in urban centers in our country.
Okay.
What is Ozempic from a first principles thinking perspective?
So, you know, Ozempic was the first one of these, what they call GLP-1 agonists. And it, you know, was basically developed for people with diabetes. And it works to slow gut motility, which is like how quickly your you know, the muscle, you know, you have muscles around your intestines and they're sort of like pushing things along, right? And if you slow that down, it gives you a sensation of being full.
Gotcha.
So you're not as hungry. And you're not suffering from hunger. So you don't have to like fight it. Where a lot of times people are like, they're trying to lose weight and it's miserable because they're like suffering. They're hungry. They're suffering. And so it kind of helps eliminate that, right? And then they came up, and so that uses one mechanism of action. Then a little time later, and so everyone knows Ozempic. The more recent one, it's called either Mounjaro or Zepbound, is one. The scientific name is tirzepatide, and tirzepatide has two mechanisms of action. So it works a little bit better because it's working on two levels. Okay, and a lot of times people have side effects with Ozempic that doesn't work. They get very nauseous, and people tend to have better results from tirzepatide. And so now you can get tirzepatide, but what they're also seeing is that because it's impacting your metabolic health so much, it seems to be, you know, a protective to your liver. It seems to potentially increase lifespan. And so those you can get prescribed. There's another one now called retatrutide that has three mechanisms of action. And I started experimenting with this about a month ago, just to kind of see what it's like.
Are we talking generally about weight loss drugs here?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. But it seems like the power of them is beyond just weight loss.
Gotcha.
They're improving your metabolic health, because so much of your metabolism, as we were talking about earlier, your metabolism is incredibly complicated and it's affecting everything, all your cells, your cellular health, not just how much weight you have and not just how much fat you have on you. And also when your metabolic health improves, it's easier to keep the fat off of you. And so retatrutide, which isn't, it's still experimental. It's not FDA approved. You can't get prescribed, but I know folks that make peptides that actually just make these things. So I'll get it from them and I'll experiment with it on myself. I was actually tweeting about this a little while ago, and retatrutide is really cool. It's got 3 mechanisms of action. So one of the things it's doing is it's slowing down your gut so you're not so hungry. It's also just directly sending a signal to your nervous system that you're not hungry. And then it's got a 3rd mechanism of action, which is basically just telling your brain that you're not hungry. So it was wild. Like I did it, I took a very low dose of it. I took a dose that was so low, I thought it would do nothing. This is probably like almost 3 weeks ago. I'm still not eating that much. For like 5 days, I basically didn't eat.
You're also able to maintain your muscle mass because of the...
Yeah, because of the plasmid injection of the follistatin gene therapy. I'm not losing any muscle. It's wild. Yeah. So, I basically didn't eat for 5-6 days straight almost. And I was, getting a little bit loopy because I'm just kind of not eating anything. And my friends are like, you should eat. I'm like, I don't want to eat. Literally, I was almost like repulsed by the idea of eating. That's how powerful it was. I mean, I'm not that big, so it has a stronger effect. If you're, 80 pounds overweight and you took that dosage that I did, you wouldn't even feel it. You'd need a much higher dose. So in a way, it almost, because I'm pretty metabolically healthy, I don't need much of it, and it has a very strong effect on me. The first time I did tirzepatide, it was the same thing. I took a super small dose, and for 2 weeks I didn't eat. But yeah, I'm not losing any muscle because my body's just not breaking down muscle.
Have any of your experiments not worked?
I'd say I don't think I'm going to keep taking the retatrutide, for example, because I didn't love it. I didn't love it.
Because of how it made you feel?
Yeah.
You felt nauseated?
No, I wasn't nauseous. I was just like a little bit, out of it. I didn't want to eat. I was kind of a little low energy. And again, if I was 80, 90 pounds overweight, I'd be like, well, who cares? Like, deal with that. It's better to not be 90 pounds overweight. But I'm not like that. So I don't want to kind of have those negative side effects.
Mm-hmm. You do know that with any podcast, there's always a group of skeptics watching the podcast.
Of course, yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that people will be questioning long-term side effects and all that.
Yeah.
My response to the skeptics for you is that I think Farb is someone who's obsessed with better health and incrementally improving the quality of life and the quality of health. Why would he do something that would harm any organ or any part of his own body?
Yeah, I don't think those things are harming me. They're actually probably good. I just don't love the feeling about it that it gave me, So we can't just trust our feelings. It seems that these things are actually very good for your organs and things like that. And if anything, I'll probably take tirzepatide, once every couple of months to just get a low dosage of it. Peptides, which we were talking a little bit about, are extremely powerful. I've been doing peptides over 10 years, and you don't keep taking them every day. You do them maybe for a month, and then you take several months off. And you do them for a month, and you take several months off. So you have to be smart about it. And I'm also testing myself a lot. I'm doing full blood panels once a month, once every few months. I'm getting my epigenetics tested regularly. I'm doing micronutrient tests, heavy metal tests. Brian Johnson's about to launch a microplastic test. I haven't had water out of a plastic bottle in 20 years.
Wow.
Like I said, I'm more risk averse than these people who give me a hard time and say I'm doing crazy risky things. I'm like, no, you're doing the crazy risky things. I haven't had food out of plastic for 20 years because I think it's ridiculous. So if you're sitting there drinking water out of plastic all day and then telling me that, I'm trying tirzepatide and I'm crazy, it's like, no, you're the crazy one. So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. And, most of these things, they're people are not just making random molecules and being like, oh, what does this do to somebody? Oh, looks, it killed this person. That's not usually how it works. They're using logic and science to be like, okay, let's make this molecule so it does this. They test it on animals, you start it in low doses and things like that. So just because something is unknown doesn't mean it has a risk. Reality is not probabilistic in this way. Because you do not know the outcome of something does not mean that its outcome is random.
Yeah. I mean, the pharma industry in general, globally, is constantly evolving. And they're coming up with newer medication. They're coming up with newer medical technology. They're coming up with newer pharmaceutical technology, which is basically Ozempic, an example. Something that maybe we take for granted is, say, something like paracetamol, which has its own uses. Most of us have taken some kind of paracetamol in our lifetimes. But when paracetamol was first introduced, maybe the people at that time looked at that as biohacking.
Of course, yeah.
So people just need to take this lens of old world out of their line of sight and view modern day biohacking for what it is, which is a continuation of the long-term human journey anyway. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing is that pharma is getting smarter and smarter, and they're learning to use, instead of just making this synthetic molecule out of some petrochemical or something like that, that we don't know what it's doing to you. Things like Ozempic and these stuff, they're peptides. They're strings of amino acids that are often already in your body. So to me, the health risks there are actually a lot lower than making some random synthetic molecule out of a petrochemical. And then the issue with a lot of synthetic drugs is, you ingest it, and your body's constantly breaking it down, right? Into, you take the main molecule itself, and then your body breaks it down into one metabolite, and then another metabolite, and then another metabolite. A lot of times we don't even know which of the metabolites is the one that works. And maybe, and then eventually it's just broken down to nothing, and it's excreted from your body. Some of the metabolites might be harmful. Some of the metabolites might be helpful. It's kind of, just throw stuff at the wall and see what works. Right. With things like peptides, they're amino acids. Your body's used to amino acids. It knows how to use them. A lot of these new cancer therapies, they're using your body to heal itself, right? So I think that's the future of medicine is precision and basically turning your body into the thing that fixes itself.
Yeah. I got to talk to the investor in you at this point.
Sure, yeah.
You invest in a lot of startups who are also working on how do I phrase this? Genetic engineering based missions.
Yeah, I mean just health in general. I work with Naval at Ravicant Capital. We invested in MiniCircle. MiniCircle I invested in before I started working with Naval, but I think he's also invested in it as well. There's a medical diagnostic company called Synex that we've invested in. So we're always looking at, actually, hopefully when I get back to San Francisco, there's another company that has developed a new test and hopefully essentially a therapy. So what they're doing is they've got a test that will, understand your genetic makeup and then create a custom cocktail for you that you take through an IV that is designed specifically for your genetics.
Gotcha.
So hopefully I'll go try that out.
Wow.
And if it's good, we might invest in that.
When these companies raise money, say they're able to raise money through people like yourself. Mm-hmm. So once the money hits the bank account, is it primarily spent on R&D?
All over the place, but usually they have to spend it on they don't have to spend it. I mean, they have to spend it in the sense that that's, if they're going to accomplish their mission, that's where they have to spend the money. They're all at different stages. So maybe one of them is sort of like, oh, I did research, my PhD research. I know this works, but we want to scale it up.
Gotcha.
Right? We got to buy the machines. We got to go do some tests. there's actually more and more of these Ozempic type things keep coming out. Like we keep seeing pitches for these, and they're all in different stages. Some of them are super early where they're like, we don't even know if this works. We haven't even tried it yet, but we need money to actually develop it and do some tests on mice, for example. So they're in all sorts of different stages.
Gotcha. Do you have a rough number of how many companies like this there are in your portfolio?
Oh, probably at least half a dozen.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about which one excites you?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Minicircle is one of the ones that excites me the most because they're potentially able to use this technology for so many things, ranging from follistatin to the Clotho that could make you smarter and reverse calcification of arteries. Maybe they can use the technology to cure HIV.
This is the same group of people who did the...
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're the investor and then they
Yeah.
injected you with the
It was
product.
the other way around. I got injected first. And then literally the next day, I'm like, take my money.
Wow.
And so within about a week after I got the injection, I became an investor.
What did they need the money for?
So in their case, they need the money to do new therapies, right? This one, the follistatin one, they had working already. But because they think the technology could apply to so many different issues, the more money they have, the faster they can figure that out.
Mm.
You know, you raise money. I'm lucky because, you know, I learned how to raise money and do entrepreneurship from Naval and my brother. My brother co-founded AngelList with Naval several years ago, you know, long time ago now, maybe 15 years ago or something. So I learned from them. And, you know, one of the things is you raise money to accelerate the inevitable. Okay, so if you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to invest in someone who says, I'll do this if I raise money, because that's not the right attitude. It's, I'm going to do this one way or the other. The money will just accelerate the inevitable. So when we give money to someone, it's just to accelerate what hopefully is inevitable, that they will succeed in their mission. But instead of it taking 20 years, maybe we can succeed in the mission in 5 years or 10 years.
We see a lot of software startups in India. I don't know how many genetic engineering startups there are.
Oh, good
honestly.
question, yeah.
Are you aware?
Not really.
No, right? Has Naval ever said anything?
No.
What excites him about this space?
You know, he's not getting younger either. And, you know, even in the one that I was talking about that I'm going to go and visit in San Francisco, I think just yesterday he was asking me, he's like, hey, find out if that therapy works. You know, because he's interested in it for himself potentially, or for his loved ones, his mother, his brother, his wife, his children, his friends.
Gotcha.
You know.
Okay. You know, we've not covered your story yet on the show after speaking for almost like a couple of hours.
Okay.
At the start of the podcast, and maybe this is the final segment of today's episode.
Okay.
Because I know we're going to talk a lot over the years, if that's okay with you.
Love that.
The first gut-related issue that you faced, these gut-related issues have become extremely common in India.
Yeah.
And people blame everyone from big pharma to processed food companies to even the British who ruled over us.
Okay,
Even
yeah.
they blamed
Why
for
not?
it.
Yeah.
That they brought wheat to our country and we're traditionally a millet-eating culture.
Okay.
So it messed with our biome.
Yeah.
I'm in media. Almost every single woman that I know who works alongside me in media, who's an on-screen personality, has either gone vegan and or gone completely gluten-free. And for sure, every guy and every girl who's on screen has gone off dairy. Effectively, in my eyes, this is all about the gut.
Yep.
Right?
Agreed.
Now, from a media perspective, it's about like skin quality, primarily.
Yeah.
A little bit about like bloating,
Sure.
but it's primarily about skin quality.
Yeah.
You said that you were able to kind of fix your gut. You probably had one of the worst cases of what I assume is a leaky gut.
Worst case I knew of, and probably leaky gut was just part of it.
Okay. Where do we even begin this conversation about the gut? Because, you know, again, even 5 years ago, gut health was barely spoken about.
Yeah.
And now it's probably one of the most popular topics when it comes to long-term health.
Yeah.
And I think too many people have faced gut related problems. I don't even know where to begin this topic.
Yeah.
So why don't we kind of start with the building blocks in terms of what does your gut do?
Yeah.
Then you can talk about your story and what you learned through your experience of fixing it.
Sure. So there are more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. Okay. In a sense, you are a donut, right? There's a hole here, there's a hole on the other end, and somewhere in the middle, there's this winding stretch that's filled with bacteria. And every single thing that you're made of went through that. And, you're almost growing out of this decaying mass inside your gut, right? So in a sense, it seems this bacteria, it's crazy. We can tell there's a specific bacteria that makes you crave chocolate. And we can see that in people who crave chocolate, they have a higher amount of this bacteria. So this bacteria is not only physically making you, it's mentally making you, it's emotionally making you. And the health of the bacteria in your gut, you're downstream of that. And so a lot of things happen. One, you might, it's a war down there, okay? The bacteria are sort of fighting each other, and the good bacteria, you want to have the good bacteria outweigh the bad bacteria, right? People take a bunch of antibiotics. I think a lot of my problem had probably a good amount to do with having too much antibiotics as a kid. It kills the good bacteria as the bacteria grows back. We don't know the proportions in which they're coming back in, and so you want to feed the good stuff, you want to get rid of the bad stuff. And it turns out, I think at least, that, when I started doing macrobiotics, macrobiotics is obsessed with gut bacteria, absolutely obsessed with it. So miso, fermented foods, all these things. I was having miso 2-3 times a day. The miso that you get at a sushi restaurant is usually pasteurized. That's not really good for you because they kill the bacteria. Right? You want unpasteurized miso, for example. That's going to constantly be putting this good bacteria into your gut, right? And different people have different opinions on this thing. So it seems to be that the good bacteria in your gut, for example, it feeds off of fiber. Now, you tell one person, they're like, oh, fiber's bad for you. You get another person that says fiber's good for you. I think a lot of times, so in macrobiotics is basically also a vegan diet. I'm not vegan today, but in macrobiotics, there's sort of this healing diet that they talk about, right? And it's basically vegan. And I think a lot of times when people have these gut issues, they say, for example, I'm going to go vegan, I'm going to go gluten-free, I'm going to go carnivore, right? Carnivore is quite popular now. It's all I eat is steak. And people will see a bunch of health issues improve when they do these things. But I think the reason that's happening is because they're basically engaging in elimination diet. They're taking out all the processed foods, okay? They're simplifying their diet to something. I mean, steak is, again, just a bunch of amino acids. You're made entirely out of amino acids and proteins. So you put some healthy amino acids in you, your body will make you, and you're not putting all these processed garbage food inside you. So by eating this elimination diet, you see a bunch of improvements. So that's why somebody will be like, oh, I stopped eating gluten. It's like, yeah, you just stopped eating a bunch of processed garbage and you started eating real food, because if you were trying to avoid the gluten, you had to eat real food instead of just bread out of the grocery store, right? So I think a lot of people see improvements because of elimination. And then some of that good bacteria can start coming back. And the way to think about the bacteria is it's like a nano factory. It's breaking things down, but also the serotonin that you have in your brain was created by the bacteria in your gut. So you need to have bacteria that creates that serotonin. And this stuff is really complex. We don't understand it that well yet. There's tests you can take, for example, these biome tests. I don't know that they do much. It's tough to really know what to do with the information, sure, we know that there's this one bacteria that makes you crave chocolate, but there's also 10,000 other bacteria in you. You know, we don't have our heads wrapped around it. So I think for people with gut issues, usually simplifying your diet helps, right? And eating a lot of good fermented foods, but like real fermented foods, like unpasteurized miso, sauerkraut. You can make your, I used to make my own pickles at home every day. Those things will help because they will basically reseed your gut.
How long did you take to fix your gut?
Probably about 2 solid years.
Really?
Yeah.
And you were vegan for those 2 years?
Yeah, I was mostly vegan for almost 7 years. With a little bit of meat here and there, but no dairy. I couldn't eat dairy. If I drank milk, I would get sick. Now I can eat it.
Really?
Yeah. I fixed my lactose intolerance.
That's my conjecture. I feel like when you go through a gut fixing diet, you're able to fix a lot of these gluten-free,
Oh, yeah, I think so
dairy-free
too.
situations.
To me, health is strength. You should be able to eat anything without it bothering you.
We go to the gym to lift weights for our muscles. I think you need to put yourself through some kind of a rigorous dietary regime to exercise your gut.
That's why it's difficult, right? It takes some serious, like for me, I was cooking food from scratch every day. Most people aren't even cooking once a day. I'm cooking 2 or 3 meals a day for 7 years. I lived that way. It's like too much work for most people. But everywhere I go, I'm just like, if there's some fermented foods, I'm eating the fermented foods. It kind of influences everything I do, but it's just a lot of work. I think that's the main issue. People just want to take a pill and fix their problems, right? They don't want to start having to cook food from scratch every day. But I'm not sure that there's any way around it, to be honest.
Gotcha.
That's why family and community is so important, because these things actually become much easier if you're doing them with other people. So for me, when I first started studying macrobiotics, I was living with 2 or 3 friends and we all did it together. And we're all helping each other cook, right? And we're eating together. And so they didn't have the same problems that I did, but we did it all together. And so it was much easier, right? And so when you're just living by yourself, it's tough to cook for one, but there's more and more options. It's funny because people talk about probiotics a lot now, but they didn't used to. We're learning that these are important.
I can't imagine you went through this in 2001.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 20 something years ago.
That's crazy, man. This has been deeply educative for me.
Cool. I'm glad. Thanks.
Thank you, bro. Before I let you go, there's just a small quick fire round that I have for you.
Love it.
5 foods.
5 foods
you'd never put into your body.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good one. So I tend to think that one of the things in macrobiotics is that when you're macrobiotic for 7 years, you are so strong, you could eat poisonous blowfish and it wouldn't harm you. So there are some foods I will never put into my body. I don't consume anything out of plastic. The main thing being water out of plastic. I would just rather like dehydrate and fall over on the ground than drink water out of a plastic bottle. Just don't do it. You can taste it. You can taste the literal plastic in it. Just cut that out of your life. Never microwave or cook food in plastic. Avoid that stuff like the plague. Other foods I wouldn't put in me. Just really heavily processed foods, like you can they almost taste like plastic when you're eating them, right? Just try and eat real food is the simplest thing as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I'll actually kind of not even include processed foods as a qualification
just cut it out.
for this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not counting sodas or chips or anything like that.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about real food.
Water out. Oh, which real foods to not eat? I think you can eat any real food.
As long as it's not coming out of a packet.
Yeah. And in moderation, Gotcha. I think there's I'm working on a book about thresholds. It's kind of geeky. And it's based a lot on this idea that quantity affects quality. And the amount of something affects the quality of the thing. So again, you should be able to eat anything, but it's just kind of the quantity of it, right? So I don't think you should eat too much meat. You know, it's essentially rotting inside you and it's not moving, right? So you've got all this like rotting flesh inside your gut, right? So I'm not a big fan of eating too much meat.
Gotcha.
I think a lot of times people are they think they got to eat meat 3 times a day or they're going to die or something like that. I actually don't think it's good. And a lot of, you got to eat super clean meat. That's the other thing. I won't eat garbage meat.
Okay.
I'd rather not eat.
How much protein do you end up eating every day?
Not much.
Really?
Yeah.
And you look like this.
Yeah.
How much protein do you end up having?
Honestly, maybe 50 to 100 grams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But again, most of the protein that your body is using is not from the protein that you're eating. It's from the protein that's already in you. Your body's constantly reusing these things, right? So
you're talking post-follistatin, right?
No, even pre-follistatin.
Even pre-follistatin.
Yeah. I was more jacked pre-follistatin, when I was younger. I'll send you some pics, but even then I wasn't I don't eat protein powders.
Gotcha.
Don't eat protein powders. No.
How come?
It's not food.
Okay. You want to expand on this thought a little?
I mean, sure. So, scurvy, right?
Yeah.
They thought scurvy had to do with vitamin C. Because, these sailors would go across the ocean, they're all dying, and then they realize that, if you just put some lemons on the boat, because they'll kind of last for a month or so. And if you have some lemon, all of a sudden you don't have scurvy. It's not the vitamin C. You can't live without fresh food. So the challenge in going to Mars and living on Mars, it's fresh food. Humans cannot live on powders and things out of boxes and cans. You can't. You need fresh food, and you could avoid scurvy by eating grass. We don't even, I think in Ayurveda they call it what? Prana or...
So there's 3 categories of food: sattvic, tamasic, and rajasic. Sattvic is like your macrobiotic diet, like very pure, very raw, food that's light on the system. Rajasic is food that's exciting for the system, so like spice, sugar would also, I think, be rajasic. And tamasic is food that's heavy and makes you lazy. So meat is in tamasic, old food is in tamasic.
Okay.
So they don't talk about completely avoiding tamasic food. They talk about a balance, and they talk about a subjective balance.
Okay.
So everyone has a different requirement.
But isn't there this concept of just like the life force in food? So the moment you pick the food, it starts losing its life force.
Sattvic food has the highest life force.
Okay.
And what's also said is if you cook a meal freshly, it has more life force.
Right.
And if you keep it in your fridge overnight, it goes from being it could be a sattvic food item, which could become tamasic the next day.
Yeah.
Because the life force goes away.
I don't food prep. I think that's crazy. I made like a week's worth of food on Sunday, and I'm eating it 5 days later. There's no life force in it anymore. There's no life for it to give you. So I don't do any protein powders. I think you could probably supplement yourself with them, but it's like, are you literally, unless you're like a competitive bodybuilder, I don't know what you're doing. Like that's just, there's no food there. It's got too much surface area. It's oxidized. It's falling apart. So I don't eat protein powders. Don't eat too much meat. No water out of plastic.
No food that's heated
I don't
in
eat
a
protein bars. I don't eat protein bars. I don't think that's food either.
Right. And also processed.
Yeah.
What about like chilies?
Like peppers.
Yeah, peppers.
Things like that. I love hot food. I absolutely love hot food. I actually think a little bit of it is probably a good hormetic stressor. You know, it gets some of the enzymes going, some of the digestive enzymes to help you digest your food.
Would you eat offal? Do you know what offal is?
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like kidney and liver and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that stuff I think is super healthy.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, if a lion goes and kills an antelope, right? And it's not starving. Say the lion's not starving, right? It's just typical hungry level. What does it eat in the antelope? Not the muscle. It eats the organs. And it leaves the muscle for the hyenas to come eat.
Really?
Because there's not much nutrients in it. Now, if the lion is starving to death, it's going to eat the whole thing and it's not going to leave anything for the hyenas, right? But in its normal course of affairs, animals that are carnivores, they kill their prey, they eat the organs, and they leave the rest of it for the scavengers.
Damn. Didn't know this.
Yeah.
Wow. And we as human beings
Do the
choose
other way around.
We choose to eat the muscles.
Yeah.
Have you heard that theory about how the ancient man was actually a scavenger?
Yeah.
And he weren't at the top of the food chain.
Interesting. Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a conversation that will never end if we wish for it to never end.
And hopefully we'll live forever and keep having it. Yeah.
Farb, I hope to have you on the show again.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro. It's great just getting to know you.
Likewise.
It's even better picking your brain in the way that we did through the course of these 2 hours.
We'll see you in San Francisco and California, I hope.
I appreciate you, man.
Please come visit.
I'm glad that we got to take your story and your mind out to Indian audiences.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to more conversations.
Likewise.
Thank you, brother.
Cheers.
Lots of respect, lots of love.
Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you, bro. That was the episode for today, ladies and gentlemen. Biohacking, longevity, these kind of conversations are an extension of all the health and medical conversations that we've already had on TRS. Please send in your guest recommendations. I genuinely believe that longevity is going to become one of those subjects, and biohacking is going to become one of those life skills that everyone will want to dive deeper into as the world progresses, as the human story progresses. We're at the brink of many technological changes that will affect our lives very deeply, that will change the way we look at the process of life. I personally feel the internet needs more conversations with Farb. I personally feel that the internet needs more biohackers to appear in the podcasting world. This was a very enlightening conversation for me, and I hope that you felt the same way. Send in your feedback on this episode. Send in your guest recommendations. TRS will be back soon with a lot more health-related conversations.